you can either ask questions in the chat box or at the end of the presentation. At the end, we will put links in for the survey for ACDD. And so it'll be English and Spanish and I think Korean too, isn't it, Maria? Yeah. So, so please fill that out because it tells ACDD that what we're doing and how we're doing it, and how successful or not successful or however it is going along. Okay, so please, when we put that in, probably right before the question and answers at the end, make sure you fill it out. And the next one, I'm Dr. Doris Hill, and before I'm the faculty at Auburn and director of the Regional Autism Network, and on the ACDD grant with Maria. And before I hand it over to no, I'll go ahead and hand it over to you now, Maria. And before we start, I want to wait. No, I'm going to do this. I'm going to stop the share. Sorry, I can't make up my mind this morning. Before I do that slide, I wanted to show you guys this. And I put the link in the chat box. We got selected to be part of Tiger Giving Day, which ends tomorrow. And you can see our project is on the right. Whoops. I don't know what I did wrong. Hold on. Our project is on the right, and you'll see Miss Kim, Miss Du, who's one of our interpreters today, and Maria. They are on the right. That's our project. It's to provide foreign language interpreters for autism families. So if you would like, it's tax deductible. And if you would like to contribute, I think it's 25 is the minimum one, but if you would like to contribute, please feel free to do so. We are very excited about it. Yeah, so that's what we have going on there. Now I'm going to stop the share and come back to the PowerPoint. And Maria, will you introduce yourself?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Maria Gutierrez. I am the Family Navigator for the Regional Autism Network. Many of you know me, and I talk to you and work with you. And I also, I am a parent of a young adult on the spectrum. So thank you for being here. And now I'm gonna pass the microphone to Miss Katherine, our speaker for today.
Great, thank you. Thank you both. I am just going to try to find all of you because I like seeing who's there, but for some reason it went away. Here we go. There you all are. Okay, great. So I'm Katherine McLaughlin, and I have been a sexuality and healthy relationship educator for over 25 years. I have a small business now where I speak around the country, talking to different groups, either people with disabilities or professionals or parents. And my hope is to help people become more comfortable talking to whoever is in their life, whether it's their child, whether it's you're a professional and you're giving support, or whether you're a self-advocate and you're helping other people with disabilities as well. So that's my hope, because there's such a need for this kind of information, that the more people that are comfortable talking about it with others, the more we can change some of the negative parts of not having education. But today we're going to talk about, and I'm going to share my screen. We're going to talk about teaching healthy boundaries and relationships. So what I'll be doing is going through some slides, and I may just touch base every once in a while to see if there are any questions about what I just talked about. But we're really going to look at this idea of boundaries. And my experience is that people with intellectual developmental disabilities or autism, a lot of things that come up or they may get in trouble for have to do with boundaries and not understanding that there's different kinds of boundaries. Now, everybody has different boundaries for themselves, but we do have some boundaries that are, part of our society as well. So it really helps people think about what are boundaries and how can I sort of go by the rules, but also around relationships as well. So not just general boundaries, but then what about boundaries in these different kinds of relationships? So that's what we're going to talk about. And, I think one of the things when you hear sexuality, people think that we're talking about sex, and really we're talking about relationships. So it's not just sex, but that might be a part of the conversation. But really it's about intimacy, connection, and belonging. So feeling part of your community, your family, your coworkers. So feeling that connection to others and having these positive relationships. It's about all different kinds of relationships. It could be friendships. It could be a sexual romantic relationship. It could be a coworker. It could be a helping professional, all these different kinds of relationships that we're in. And many people with disabilities feel isolated because they're not going by what people expect, these rules or ideas that we have in our society. So they can feel really isolated. But also sexuality is about being feeling good about the gender. So when we're born, we get a gender, right? We get boy or girl for the most part. And so feeling good about that, and it matches how you feel, as well as sexual orientation. Who are you attracted to? It's about how we feel about others and ourselves, our self-esteem, our body image. A lot of people with disabilities talk about not feeling confident with who they are. So it's about, feeling good about yourself too. And it's about sexual expression and behavior. But it's a big part of who we are. And what I often say is that everyone is a sexual being, but that doesn't mean that they're having sex. It means that they have a sexuality. So everyone has one, and it may be sort of typical or atypical, or, it really just depends on the person. But lots of self-advocates or people with disabilities say that they want and need to learn about sexuality for very similar reasons to what I was just talking about, what sexuality means. So we can learn to have healthy relationships, so we aren't lonely, so we're able to make informed choices, so we can pick the right person for the toughest part of the relationship, making it last, so we can be safe because we all have desires and needs, and that's okay, so that people know their rights, so we can be sexual self-advocates and not just self-advocates. And many self-advocates talk about when they bring up something like dating or privacy or anything like that, people get really nervous. They get worried about them, and so they don't really know how to respond. But if they were to ask, I'd like to get a job, or I'd like to try to live on my own, or something along those lines, people say, okay, great, let's figure out how you could do that. Maybe still a little nervous, but people aren't as afraid to talk about it. So that kind of matches with this idea of people want relationships, and we want to help people have healthy relationships and be able to speak up for what they want and need and what their boundaries are. So this is sexual self-advocacy, speaking up for yourself sexually, getting information, so learning about the topic so that you aren't as vulnerable, taking a stand, saying to whomever, this is my choice, stating your sexual limits and desires with a partner, respecting others' limits and desires, starting to do what you want with relationships. So that's just kind of a summary of what it means, but it means speaking up for what you want. And then, the wanting to be in a relationship or meet someone, even if it's a friend, I want to meet people. And then being respectful in those relationships as well. All right, so what we're going to talk about today is we're going to discuss some of the benefits of providing sexuality education. And we're going to look at some different activities that you can use with someone you're supporting or with your own children around these different boundaries. So we're going to talk about the different types of relationships that there are, as well as public and private. And then we'll move into a little bit on friendship. Why is it important? And then moving from a friend to a partner. So if the person you're supporting is looking for relationships, how do they do that in a way that is respectful of boundaries? We're going to talk about body language, because sometimes that's a clue to us about whether what we're doing is okay or not. Also tricky for people with autism, or some people with autism, around many say they feel like they're missing the clue, the cue that they're supposed to be receiving. So we'll talk a little about that. And then we'll also talk about consent. So how do you consent? What is true consent? As well as sexual abuse prevention too. And then speaking up, how do we teach our children or those we support how to speak up when something's bothering them, or they want to set a boundary? All right, so I don't know, Maria, if you can help me with this, because I'm not sure who would go in what room, or should I just keep us all here together?
Probably will be better if we keep everybody together, because
Let's do
I am
that.
not sure if somebody might just not have that accessible technology.
Sure. Yeah, let's just do that then. That's fine. But I'm curious for all of you, what was the primary message that you received about sexuality and healthy relationships while you were growing up? And you could put those in the chat. So what message? And it could be a message that was said to you, or it could have been a message just that you picked up on at home. You know, maybe you asked a question and the person left the room or something. You know, you sort of got this message that, maybe I'm not supposed to talk about this. Okay. I see your question, Maria, and I'll wait and talk about that as well. It's a great question. Good girls don't. Okay, that was the message. Yep. Other people, some messages they received, and it might be different based on the culture of your family too. But good girls don't is a pretty common one. I'll give it a minute, and then I will talk about some of the messages that I've heard people say. Don't let anyone touch you as a woman are like a mirror. If you touch it, you will be stained. Wow. Yeah. So some of that, don't let anyone touch you, because as women are like a mirror. If you touch it, you will be stained. So a message about don't let anybody touch you, because if you do, then you're going to have a stain on you. Yeah, it's pretty heavy kind of message. Yeah, a lot of what I've heard too is just don't talk about it. Kind of like you're on your own is the message that I get from people often. That tends to be the number one message that is given. Don't talk about it. And that can be a real barrier for us, because we didn't have a lot of practice talking about it. And I've had parents say to me that, can you just answer this question so that I can hear what a normal, healthy conversation actually sounds like? Because we don't have an opportunity to, many of us, talk about it when we're growing up. It becomes normalized. It's something you talk about, then you talk to your own kid. So many of us don't have those role models and know, what does a healthy conversation sound like? We either don't talk about it or we joke about it, would be the other thing as well. Can someone read me the Spanish ones?
Okay, hold on just 1 second. Miss Iris, can you adjust your microphone? It looks like when you're interpreting, the families cannot really understand. Maybe you are too far from. Can you? ¿Me pueden hacer saber si pueden escuchar mejor a la intérprete? They said that it sounds, ajá, está mejor, está mejor. Gracias. Gracias. Sorry about that.
Okay, are there any in Spanish in the chat that I need to know about? Are they messages? I think so, something about tradition in Spanish.
Miss Iris, we could hear you, so you're gonna have to put yourself on mute.
Oh, I think I just put her on mute.
Yes, okay, thank you.
Mhm.
No, it was about that they couldn't hear the interpreter. You could proceed.
Okay, great. All right, then I'll keep going here. So when we're talking about healthy boundaries, I think of it as how to speak up if others are violating your boundaries or bothering you, or how to avoid violating others' boundaries or bothering them. And sometimes we do, by accident. And we can always apologize and try not to do it again. But it's both speaking up for yourself, but also sort of having an understanding of what are pretty typical boundaries. All right, so I think the important piece is to understand any visual aids. I have some Spanish handouts that I might be able to send afterwards, but nothing, not the slide deck. All right, so let's keep going. So we're going to talk about the different types of relationships. And the reason we talk about this is there are certain ways of interacting in these different relationships. There's certain ways of certain topics that are okay to talk about, and certain ways of touching in different relationships. And sometimes people with disabilities don't necessarily know what's okay or not okay. And they see everyone as a friend or someone they can talk to about anything. So really understanding the different types and kind of the rules within those. So understand what are the different types of relationships and how do you relate to each type, and how do you touch, and what kind of information do you share with people. So basically a relationship is between two people. Sometimes they talk to one another and interact. We talk and interact differently depending on the relationship. So you can ask, can anyone name a type of relationship? Like, who are you in relationships with? And people will say, my mom, or my best friend Tiffany, or my teacher, or my doctor. So then I put them into a category. So we have close family and friends. We have casual friends, acquaintances, and groups. We have helping professionals. There's also strangers, which we wouldn't necessarily think of as being in a relationship with, but we'll talk about that. And then there's romantic sexual relationships. So this is for when someone wants to have a sweetheart or a partner. It's a totally different kind of relationship than these other relationships. So I have some videos here that you will have access to, but they're on our website. And it's basically showing people the different kinds of relationships that we're in. So this one is two people walk towards one another, brief eye contact, and move on. So you could show this and then say, what kind of a relationship do you think these two people have with all, is it a close relationship? Is it casual friends? Is it strangers? Is it a helping professional? And how can you tell? So we can start looking at, how do you know? Well, they smile at each other, but they go right by, they don't talk to each other. So they're probably strangers. And some people talk to strangers and some people don't. But what I've noticed with people with disabilities is that they've gotten very strong messages that strangers are dangerous. And I think some strangers may be dangerous, but not all. And also this idea that, if there's any kind of abuse, it's usually by someone who the person with the disability knows. So they're not afraid of people they know, but they're afraid of people they don't know. And that's how it's divided up. And we want to make sure that people know, even people that could hurt you. Most will not, just like strangers. So you just have to, pay attention to all people. So this video is strangers. And then there's also one where they're co-workers. Right, so they spend a little more time together, a little more eye contact. They say hello, with big smiles and, getting some lunch. Yeah, I wanted to enjoy some of the sunshine. Well, see you back at the office. And asking what kind of a relationship is this and how can you tell? So they definitely know each other. But see you back at the office sounds like they're co-workers. So they're part of that casual friend acquaintance group. So people that you're in class with, if you're in school, so that would be your casual friends. You know them, but you don't know them very well, and you don't do anything with them outside of that group. So these coworkers aren't friends. They know each other, right? It's different than a stranger. But then the other thing is, do you do anything with the person outside of work? No, then they're a casual friend or acquaintance. And this one you'll see is they're really loud. They're so excited to see each other. They hug. They're very close, you can tell. So I've been trying to call you. Oh, I've been so busy. My daughter's sick. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Could I bring you guys some dinner one night? That would be great. I'll call you tonight and we can make plans. So it's, they hug. It shows you really how close the relationship is based on how they touch one another too, and their eye contact as well. So those are 3 videos you can use to show the different types of relationships. And what I do have also that I mentioned is some handouts on different types of relationships that are in Spanish that I can send Maria afterwards. I'm just making a note so I don't forget. All right. Okay, and then again, you can see here, reading 1, brief eye contact. So just kind of looked at each other, but not always. Strangers keep distance between them, but do walk towards each other, but they don't touch. And there's no conversation. The second greeting, the casual, the longer eye contact, walk towards one another, smiling, but no physical touch. I think one taps one on the shoulder briefly, but no hugging, no big things. And they use each other's names. So that's a signal that they know each other. They know each other's names. And then the last one, there's even longer eye contact, and they're smiling, walking towards one another, hugging. They know each other's lives and family, and they're really good friends. They're close friends. So the reason it's so important to have this distinction is there's certain things that we do in these relationships, just like this. You don't touch with a stranger, you don't touch really casual friends, but people that we're really close to, we hug often. And it might depend on your family or the person you're supporting's family, how they greet each other, but you don't just hug everyone, right? So who do you give that special connection to? So that tends to be an issue where boundaries can be violated. So if I hug a stranger, the stranger may get upset because we don't hug strangers. And then I'll ask, like, can you describe the difference between something that is public and something that is private? And just see what they say around this question. Like, what does that mean, private? And what does it mean, public? But then I teach this idea. So public is where other people are there or might be there. It's a place where people can go in and out. Certain ways of touching, speaking, and touch are okay to do in public, but not all. And then private is where you're alone, or maybe you're alone with someone else, and no one can come in and out of that space. There's certain ways of speaking and touch that are okay to do in private, but not in public. And then, and again, I have this in Spanish as well. You can talk about, is this picture public or private? And people will say, public. How do you know? How can you tell? Well, there's lots of people there and it's a bus. Okay, great. What if nobody's in there and you're way in the back and no one can see, the bus driver's way in the front and they can't see you? Then it would be private, right? No, because people come in and out and you're not alone. And then this would be private. If you're home and the door's closed, this would be considered a private place. So you can ask, how do you know? Here's a movie theater. Is it public or private? And people usually say public because there's people there. But then, well, what if no one's there and it's just you and your partner and you're in the way back, you're doing a little kissing back there? Is that all right to do in this public place? Oh yeah, because nobody's there. No, wait, hold on a second. Remember, people can come in and out, so it's not a private space. And this one's kind of tricky because we don't really know if this is private, but it could be public. It could be a park or the beach or a swimming pool or something because they have a bathing suit on. If they're wearing their bathing suit to the mall, that wouldn't be okay. That would be crossing a boundary that we wear clothes when we're in public. These are the only places that we can wear bathing suits or at home in our room. And this is hard because it could be her own backyard and no one can see her. And it's okay to be in a bathing suit in your backyard. But this is one that's a little bit tricky about whether it's public or private. And then besides the pictures that we looked at, what are some other examples of public places? Those are questions that I will ask. Like, where else are there lots of people or people can come in and out? The grocery store, school, the doctor's office, the waiting room in the doctor's office, the living room in your own home would be public. And then what are public places in your home? So anywhere that, unless you live alone, anywhere besides your bedroom are private. I'm sorry, public. And if people have roommate, maybe two kids sleep in the same room or something like that, then you might want to give each one a turn having some privacy in that room as well, so that you do have privacy at home. And then, what is okay to talk about in public? So what kind of topics are okay to talk about in a public place? So we might talk about the weather, right? We did, as soon as we got on this webinar, we started talking about it's raining down there and it's going to snow up here. So that's a public topic. When we first see someone or talk with someone, we might talk about the weather. We might talk about vacation that we went on. We might talk about a movie. So these are things we can talk really to anyone about. And that's what we want to make sure people understand, that we're not going to talk about private things with certain people. So what happens when we talk about private topics like our bodies or things that are happening with our body or sexual acts, those are private conversations. They're not bad and they're not wrong. They're just private. So we want to make sure they understand the different types of topics rather than going right to private things with someone they don't know. All right, and then how can we touch one another in public? And usually people say, well, you can hold hands, you can hug quickly, you can give a little kiss on the cheek, different ways of touching certain people in public. And I usually ask about kissing. And has anyone ever seen a couple in the corner at a restaurant really kissing and not behaving the way we would expect them to? And I'm not sure that this would translate into Spanish or Korean, but one of the things we say here is get a room. Whenever we see people kissing like that, we're like, get a room. And what we're really saying is get some privacy. I'm feeling uncomfortable with what you're doing here as well. So I'm going to just finish public and private, and then I'll talk about these two questions that I see. And then what are things that are private? We already talked about bodies and maybe sexual things and, pregnancy, like all the topics around sexuality can be private. And places that are private really are your bedroom at home with the door closed and your roommate or sibling is not there, or the bathroom, depending on your situation, with the door closed. And that's really the only private places that there are. Bathrooms in the mall are public bathrooms. So really the only private place to do certain behaviors, and we'll talk about it, are at home. So what body parts are private? Well, really our whole body's private. No one should touch us unless they get our permission. But we'll talk about that as well. But really, when we think about body parts, and I'll talk about it when we talk about sexual abuse as well. So I'll talk about what private parts are and what's okay to talk about in private, and really anything. Because you're probably only going to be with someone in private, like a teacher because you're having some trouble, or a doctor's office in the exam room with the door closed. So we can talk about really anything, our private parts, our bodies, those kinds of things. And is it okay to talk about private things with? And I'll show you a handout that's very helpful. All right, so let me just see if there's anything more here. Okay, so this is kind of like touching and privacy, some examples of the way someone might touch their own body, and examples of the way examples of ways we touch someone else in private. So these are more about people's bodies and what's okay to do, and these would be things to only do in private. And what is a place that can be private when we want to touch ourselves or someone else? And sometimes we have to speak up and say, I want some privacy, just to be alone in my room for a while. And that's okay to have that requirement. All right, so let me stop here. And I just want to open this up to these questions I see. So let me go back. And so the first one is, do you think a person with a severe disability, someone who is nonverbal, has sexual desires? My child is getting to be a teenager, but he has a low intellect. He doesn't talk, but I've seen him liking redhead girls. Yeah, I mean, the reason that people feel attracted is because they've gone through puberty. And so their body has changed from a child to an adult. So no matter what, most people have sexual feelings. Maybe some people don't, but it's not based on their disability. It's just based on kind of who they are. So I would say yes. And there are, lots of people with severe disabilities that touch their bodies themselves. And we want to just make sure it's in a private place too. And if you're noticing him liking redhead girls, then that's probably some attraction. So biology happens. All right, let's see what else we have here. Okay, we've got some messages. Can the school work on helping the students learn about boundaries? Yes. Can I request to create an IEP goals to address inappropriate touching when, oops, it just moved, when creating someone? Okay. He's still little, but he has been going to be a big boy one day. Yes. And I'm worried he will get suspended. Absolutely. This is the time to do this, is to really start teaching what you would expect. I don't know how old he is, but what do people without disabilities, how do they behave? What boundaries have they learned, however they've learned them? And we want to teach those boundaries. So I'm going to show you a video right now that I think would be really helpful to your son. Can you share any information about how we help in Spanish? Oops. Maybe some books, or are there any websites in Spanish with this information? Yes. And I told Maria that I'll grab those resources and get them to her after the webinar. So there are some resources for families who speak Spanish. And I have some handouts too that I'll send. As far as Korean, I don't know as much about whether there are. We've been doing a lot of work with Chinese families in New York. And so we have Chinese, but we don't have Korean materials yet, but maybe. All right, let me show you this video because I think it's a great one for us to use with young children, but also, you know, it's great for anyone, and really important messages that we want to give. And maybe it will help at school to give these messages and at home to give these messages. And this is around consent for kids. So it is for kids, but I find that adults with developmental disabilities need to hear these same kinds of messages. Oh, actually, I've got to make sure I got this set right. Okay, there's that. Let me get the sound. Oh, right. I'm sorry. I realized I turned off so I'm not sure if you saw my slides, but.
For kids, this is you. Okay, it doesn't look exactly like you, but let's say it's you. This is your body, and you get to decide what you do with your body. No one else is entitled to tell you what to do with your body. Not your friends, not strangers, not adults you know. No one is entitled to decide what you do with your body, except you. That's called bodily autonomy, by the way. And that's what consent is all about. Everyone is different. Some people love to hug, and some people hate hugs. And each person gets to decide what they're comfortable with. Can a hug-loving person just start hugging someone at random? Nope. They need consent. How do people know if they have consent? They ask. Would you like a hug?
Yes, I would. Can I hold your hand?
I'd rather not.
Okay.
If a person doesn't say yes,
Can I hug you?
then they haven't given their consent. It's really pretty simple. Ask for consent, listen to the answer. By the way, if a person bribes someone or threatens someone to say yes, that's not consent. Sometimes adults will try to tell a kid what to do with their body.
Go kiss Aunt Doris goodbye.
But the kid still gets to decide. No thanks, that makes me uncomfortable. I'll just wave goodbye. Some things kids can't consent to. They can't enter into legal contracts. They can't vote. And they can't consent to sexual stuff, 'cause they're kids. So if an adult does something that kids can't consent to, that's not okay. The adult is wrong, and it's not the kid's fault. And that's when it's most important to tell a trusted adult like a teacher. Why? Because it's your body, and no one else is entitled to tell you what to do with it. Practice consent.
Okay. Now, I'm curious what you all thought about that. Would you use it in some way or not? What did you think about that one? Oh, I think I saw a hand go up or something a minute ago. Nancy, are you saying you would use it, or you have a question, or just let me know?
Yo tengo pregunta. I have a question.
Yeah.
¿Está ese video en español? Is this video in Spanish?
I can't speak Spanish, so is it all right for, could someone interpret for Nancy? Or?
She's asking if this video is in Spanish. Do you happen
Oh.
to know if there's any videos that are
Oh, yeah.
languages?
Good question. I'm with you. Right. It's a good question. I don't know the answer to it, but I'll find out. All right. Okay, let me just take a quick look. I think there was one more. Okay. At what age should we start talking to our kids about it? Yeah, so I say right away. I don't know how old your kids are now, but this would be a great time to start. If they're really young, we're going to want to talk about things like different kinds of relationships, bodily autonomy. It's your body and you get to decide what's right for you. Because what happens is many people with disabilities become compliant and they'll do what people tell them to do, especially someone who is an authority. So this really sets them up to not really being able to say, no, don't touch me. Or and it's hard because I know as parents, we like our kids like nice and clean and things like that, but we really shouldn't force them. Because then we're giving this message, unless we have to, and we can explain why we're doing something, like maybe they need some medical treatment that they don't want, but they need it. And that's our role as a parent. But we want to make sure they have lots of opportunities to say no and make decisions early on. The other thing is, oh yes, I'll get that too. The other thing to talk about, body parts, what they're called. So, and using medical terminology. So the reason we want to do this is that it normalizes the body part. There's nothing, it's just a body part. It also, unfortunately, people have reported abuse and didn't have the language, and it took people a long time to figure out what they meant. So there was an older woman with a developmental disability at a day program, and she kept saying, he keeps touching my purse. And so they took her bag and put it in a locker, tried to, because they were thinking it meant her bag or her purse. And then 3 weeks later, they found out that that was a nickname for her vulva and vagina. So that's why, that's another reason it's important that people know the names so they can explain if something happened. And then the other thing is, I think it makes them appear less vulnerable when they have information. So if someone were to, try to get them to touch their sexual parts and they said, no, I'm not touching your penis or something like that, it shows that they have some education. And so then they appear less vulnerable too. So it kind of protects them in a way. And you can say their private words, and we don't talk, the people you would talk to about these are close family and friends and your doctor or the school nurse, right? They're still they're private parts, but important to know the names. And you can have little names for them at home, but you want to make sure they know also the medical ones as well. All right, I think that was it. Yes, use it. I would like to know if you're back. Okay, yes, I will send you the link, Maria, of the video. Okay, great. Now, let me show you this handout that kind of puts types of relationships and touch and topics that we talk about. So it's combining that whole idea of the different kinds of relationships and how you interact and what you talk about with these different kinds of relationships. So close family and friends, depending on how you touch close family and friends, but a lot of people will hug someone that they haven't, especially if they haven't seen them in a while, but they hug and they're excited. And so that would be really the only people that you would hug, or whatever you do with people that you're really close to, are close family and close friends. And you talk about public and private things, but when you talk about private things, you talk about them in a private place. So you might be with close family at the grocery store, and what we might say is, we might say something like, that's a great question, but we're in a public place, so let's wait until we get home or in the car, and we'll talk about this. So we'll have some privacy. Casual family, friends, and groups. This says interns, so that depending on different programs, that was one. You know, it's just a group you're part of, really, the basketball team. And how you touch is you fist bump each other, you know, people do that. They high five each other, hey, high five, or they shake hands. So those are the ways we would touch casual family, friends, and groups. And we only talk about public things with that group, that type of relationship. So something that sometimes comes up is a young woman with an intellectual developmental disability gets her period that morning or starts to menstruate and goes into class and tells everyone that she just started her period. Now there's nothing wrong with that, but it's a private thing. So we don't tell private things to people we only know a little bit, unless it's like a doctor or a nurse. So coworkers is another one very similar to casual. So really your coworkers, you're part of a group, you're casual. And then helping professionals, and this same way you touch, and you still talk about only public things unless it's certain helping professionals, like a doctor or a nurse in a closed exam room. So the door is closed, so you have privacy to talk about private things. Or maybe your teacher at school and you're having a problem, you would talk to the teacher in private, or the school nurse. But we wouldn't talk about private things with the person at the grocery store, with the bus driver. They're helping professionals. They're paid to drive the bus, but they're not someone you would talk about private things with. And then people you don't know or strangers, there's no touching. And like I said, some people like to talk to strangers, and some people don't, and that's fine. But if you do, you only want to talk about public things like the weather and the movie at the movie theater. And you don't really only talk for a little bit with strangers. You don't want to keep talking and keep talking. And then there's sexual romantic relationships, and you always need consent. So you can't, like that video showed, can a hug loving person just go up? No, we always have to get permission to touch someone before we touch them. And you can talk about public and private things, but you can, private things have to be in a private place. And it wouldn't be when you first started dating. You really want to start with public things to get to know people, and then you can move into private things. All right, so we already talked about these things. I think I've got some duplicate slides here. But here's a role play that you can use to really talk about all that we've just talked about. So you could practice this with someone you're supporting or your child. And here it is. So Ashley and Isabella work together in a store. Ashley sits in a chair and begins working. Ashley sees Isabella and says, "Hi, Isabella, how are you today?" And Isabella says, I'm good. Hey, what did you do last weekend? And Ashley looks up from her work and says, I spent time with friends. And Isabella says, who were you with? You aren't wearing a ring. Do you have a boyfriend? I think you should try to meet someone. You're old enough. Don't you want a boyfriend or a girlfriend? Ashley looks uncomfortable. So if you go to the next slide, and you have all these slides too, you're going to ask, why do you think Ashley is uncomfortable? She's getting a lot of questions from Isabella. Why is Isabella doing, what is Isabella doing that isn't okay? She's talking about private things at work with someone that's just a casual friend, and really like tons and tons of questions coming at her. And why is that not okay? I mean, they know each other because they're at work. So we don't talk about, our private things or things outside of work. And the person doesn't know the person very well, and they're starting to feel uncomfortable. So then what can Ashley do or say? And this is the hard part. This is the part about sticking up for your boundaries and saying what you're okay with and not okay with. So it could say something like, I'm sorry, but that is private. You're asking me personal questions that I don't want to answer. And then really having a conversation about what's difficult about saying these things to someone when you're feeling uncomfortable, because it's hard to speak up and say, please don't do that, or I don't like that. And so how do we practice and teach that skill? Like, it's okay to have your feelings and your needs addressed. So we want to make sure that people have lots of opportunity to say what they want and need, and practice that as well. So the video where it showed Aunt Gladys, I think it was, and what happens is parents might say, oh, Aunt Gladys is leaving, go give her a hug. And the kid says, I'm not comfortable with that, I'll just wait. And then the parent might say, do you want to hurt Aunt Gladys's feelings? And so what we're teaching is her feelings are more important than your feelings. So even if you feel a little uncomfortable, like you wish your kid would hug Aunt Gladys, it can be really, it's sending a message that what they want and need doesn't matter. So we want them to, if they feel uncomfortable, say it, and we respect that. All right, any more questions? Okay, here we go. Great question. Okay, so I think it's better to show drawings. I wouldn't say necessarily cartoons or pictures of real body parts, but I think for your own kid, I guess I'd ask, like, how do they learn best? Would body real pictures? I think in the curriculum that I wrote, it's all drawings of people. So not cartoons, but people, but it's drawings, which is a little less sometimes people don't want to look at pictures. It could feel like a boundary violation if someone's like, oh my God, so drawings tend to get a little have less of that reaction. Can you read the question so others know? Oh, I'm sorry. So that was, do you think it's better to show pictures like cartoons or pictures of real body parts? Where could I find real body pictures to show to my kids? And I'll show you a bunch of resources that have these kinds of things as well. And I think cartoons are okay, but I'll show you a resource, and I know that resource has a lot of Spanish. So we also want to talk about friends, and some of the issues around boundaries with friends is someone gets a new friend and they get so excited, they call them, 10 times a day. So we want to make sure that we're not crossing boundaries. And also talking about, well, how do you meet friends? And if you're really excited about the relationship, what can you do to not bother them by texting 10 times a day or calling them 10 times a day? We want to teach that rule of text once or call once and then wait for them to reach back to you. And if it's really difficult, you're going to have to find something to make sure you don't bother them. How can I teach and model a no means no? Yep. I think, well, I'm going to talk to you about consent around sexual things, but I think just anything like that, the kid video, you know, you ask someone if they can hug, if they want to hug and they say no, we need to listen to that. We need to accept the no. It might hurt our feelings, it might make us feel bad, but it's not their job to make us feel good. So then you can talk about when you get a no, and when you say a no and you feel like people aren't respecting your no, then you can get some help if you need it. And also, how do you accept a no? So how do you give a no? And how do you accept a no is part of consent too. And what do you do when you feel hurt or sad? What could you do? So, okay, someone said they didn't want to hug you and you feel really hurt. I understand that. What can you do to make yourself feel better when you feel sad or hurt? I go for a walk. I watch my favorite movie. I write in a journal. I draw a picture, you know, whatever it is, finding out how do you take care of your own feelings. So that's friendship, but it also moves into finding a partner or a sweetheart as well. A lot of what I talked about is true for any relationship. We don't want to call 10 times a day, that kind of thing. So first of all, we're feeling interested. Now, I think the important thing here is for people to know who would it be okay to be in a relationship with. So just because someone says yes doesn't mean that they're able to say yes. So we want to make sure that people understand who it's okay to. So could it be somebody of the same gender? And you might have different values around that. But what we do know is about 1 in 10 people are gay or lesbian and can get married in any state in the country here. So it could be, if that's who someone is attracted to. So that would be someone already in a relationship. And this is the part where that professionals really aren't supposed to give their opinion about that. Say, what do you think? But family, absolutely, you can say, I don't think that's a good idea, and why, and you can explore, well, what are some of the things that could happen? What are the positives and the negatives, and explore that. Someone who said they're not interested. Yeah, no, they're not. If they said no, it's time to move on. And that can be really hard. And let's figure out how to manage our feelings about that. But when someone says they're not interested, there's one part where you could maybe ask a second thing, but after that, you've got to move on, because it could become harassment. So if you say, hey, you want to go to the movies with someone, and they go, no, you could say, well, do you want to have coffee or go for a walk in the park? They might say yes, that it was the movie they didn't want to do. But park sounds great. Or they might say no. And when you get those 2 no's, it's time to move on. You got to respect the no. A paid support person, so somebody that supports you, they're paid to support you, would not be okay to be in a sexual romantic relationship with. And then you also want to check the consent laws in your state. I don't know if anyone knows the age of consent, but just because someone has an intellectual developmental disability does not immediately mean that they can't consent. There's different state laws that you're going to want to get familiar with, because you want to make sure that the person you're supporting or young kids know the ages. So if there's, let's say, a 20-year-old and they want to be in a sexual romantic relationship with someone who's 15, it's probably illegal, even if they say yes and they want it too. So you have to figure out your state laws as well around consent. I feel guilty. I have made my child give hugs and he doesn't like it. How can I explain to the family members about that? I'm going to change that and be more in tune with my kid. You know, just, you're not the only one that's done that. Many parents, You know, we want our kids to be kind to our family member, right? So of course, we've all done things like that. So I think not feeling guilty if you can, or take care of yourself around the feeling guilty. But you're right, family members will object because they're used to it, right? And they love this little boo, you know? And so I think teaching them that you want to teach your child to be able to say what they want and need and respect that. Because if they say, no, I don't want to do that, and we make them, we're teaching them that it doesn't matter what they feel or think, and that you're the boss. So I think explaining it to family, like, you know, people with disabilities are vulnerable to being taken advantage of. And I know you wouldn't do it, and I know he cares about you, but he's uncomfortable hugging. And so what I used to do with my kids is I would say, Aunt Gladys is leaving. How would you like to say goodbye to her? I'll wave, or I'll give her a big hug, right? So they're kind of in charge, and okay, let's make sure Aunt Gladys is good with a big hug. So just kind of opening it up. How would you like to say goodbye to her? Because that's really what we're doing. We're saying goodbye. So what would be a nice way to, you know, that would feel comfortable to you to say goodbye? Great. So the ways to get to know someone, and this can be tricky because flirting, like letting somebody know you're interested, can feel like it's the same behaviors that can be sexual harassment. If someone wants the flirting, it's really nice. They love it. If they don't want it and you keep doing it, it can become harassment. So we'll talk about that, talking on the phone or texting, asking him or her to join you in a group activity, and asking them out on a date. So that's kind of how you get to know someone and let them know you're interested. So you could say something like, you look really nice. I really like your shirt. It's nice seeing you here. You could smile. Sometimes people will wink at each other as a sign of, but not always. You can look them in the eyes, and then how do you know it's working? And that's, they giggle, they do the same thing back to you, they move a little closer to you. And how do you know it isn't working? They run out of the room, they say, stop talking to me like that. They look away, or feel, you can see their body is kind of shutting down. So, you know, paying attention to body language, which can be difficult for some people to read the body language. So you want to teach body language reading. Like, what is my body saying without me speaking? And if you're nervous to flirt to get to know someone, you could practice. You could write them a note, but we always have to be respectful with flirting. So we don't want to stare at somebody's breasts when we're asking them, or they're trying to flirt with them, because that can feel uncomfortable to the person. So we want to be really respectful that if you can do eye contact, and I know some people struggle, you know, with eye contact, you could look maybe beyond the person, but not at their body parts. So you can play around with teaching body language and what is it saying. So if I say to you, you know, am like looking right at you, or sitting upright, smiling, you know, it says I'm pretty comfortable, right? But if I'm like this, and you can say, well, what does that say? What is my body saying? Even though you can't hear anything, what is it saying? There's a tear coming down someone's face. They're sad. Confusion might be a little kind of, you know, so you can try to have them guess what the body is saying and practice that. Talking on the phone, again, when we're, you know, talking, oh, great, thank you, Maria. When we're talking on the phone about public topics until you get to know the person. So we don't want to start, hi, it was so nice meeting you. Can I tell you about my body? You know, we want to talk about public topics when we first get to know someone. So you could say, how was your day? What did you do today that was fun? What did you do today that was boring? What did you eat any good food today? What was it? What's your favorite music? So you're getting to know a person. You don't know them well enough to talk about private things. And this, just that same thing around a general, this is how many times per day is okay to call someone. And a general rule would be once a day or once every other day. And how early can you call or text someone? And, I think it's changing a little bit, but a general rule is not after 9 at night, unless they tell you it's okay, and not before 9 in the morning. But I think with texting, people might text later, but just to kind of know, that would be a boundary of calling someone at 3 in the morning or something like that. That might be a boundary crossing. And then thinking about groups. I'm not sure if all of you have watched Love on the Spectrum, but it's got some great scenarios of people wanting to date. And one of the things that seems really difficult is just the 2 people on a date. There's so much pressure. And you can just feel, the people like getting uncomfortable. And in the Love on the Spectrum, they, sometimes people feel so uncomfortable, they leave. They feel so much anxiety. So sometimes being in a group of people helps. You get to know the person, but it's not just the 2 of you. There's so much pressure. So thinking about what are some group activities you could do with this person. So maybe it's something like, a self-advocacy meeting or a dance or something, where there's lots of people around versus that kind of date. So thinking about what are some ways to do that. All right. And how can I teach my child that secrets are not okay and that it's okay to keep them secret? Okay, so what I usually do around that is a great question is, and we'll talk about it when we talk about sexual abuse, is there's a difference between a secret and a surprise. So a surprise is like a birthday present or something. And so it's eventually going to come out. And a secret is something that will never come out. So if someone says, let me do this to you, it'll be our little secret, that's a red flag, like, whoa. As soon as someone tells you not to tell anybody something, it can be a clue. Now, if it's your best friend and you tell each other lots of things that you don't want them to tell other people, then that's more about private, keeping something private. But if you're worried about your friend, you might say something to your parents about the secret. So my teacher always takes me in the room and touches my sexual parts when it's lunchtime. And he told me never to keep it, let's keep it a secret, or she told me to keep it a secret. Then you might get some help because you're worried about your friend as well. So hopefully that helps. And then asking somebody out on a date. And, a lot of self-advocates say it's really important to talk about, okay, if we're going to go on a date, who's going to pay for the date? Are we going to just go for a walk in the park and there's no cost? Or are we going to go out and eat? And how are we going to pay? Like, does one person think that since they asked, they have to pay? Does one person think if it's a man and a woman that the man has to pay? Like, how do you want to sort this out beforehand? Because what happens is you get in that position and you're a little uncomfortable because you have different ideas about it. So they say they like to talk about it right away. And also, what do you think should happen too? Like, where are we going to go? Find something that you have in common, like walking on the park and feeding the ducks, or, what do you like to do? Have a picnic at the park? Or so find out what both of you like to do as well. And how are you going to get there? Like, I'll just meet you there, or will someone pick you up, or how will you get there too? All right, so let's talk about consent And this is more for sexual relationships. So I showed you earlier, just like general touching and consent. But like somebody wrote, how do I teach that no means no? And, years ago, when I was growing up, consent, people would say, well, consent means they didn't say no, but that's not consent. Consent is saying yes, right? It's not anything about, well, they didn't say no. And it even showed that on the video as well, when someone says, they didn't say yes, so it's not consent. And we'll talk about what the opposite of consent too. So if someone says they love you when they don't really mean it, they're lying to get you to say yes to something. And that wouldn't be true consent. If they're threatening you, if you don't have sex with me, I'll find someone who will, that's a threat. And they're making you say yes. So what you'll see is it's getting a yes that is freely chosen. So there's no lies, there's no threats, there's no pressure. Come on, please, no. Oh, come on, no. So they're pressuring you to get you to say yes. And what I say too is I could hold a gun to your head and get a yes, but that's not freely chosen. So freely chosen means you're asked and you feel like you can say yes or no, and that answer will be respected. Blackmail, saying if you don't have sex with me, I'll tell everyone you're a real jerk, or I'll tell somebody that you called in sick for work and you weren't even sick. They've got something that they can hold over you. Intimidation, you're such a baby, when are you going to grow up? And bribes, I lent you, I'm going to say $10, so you owe me, you have to kiss me for 10 minutes, right? So like that video said, bribes, that's not true consent. And then forcing the person to have sex, physical force is called rape, and that is illegal. So you can use, so how I asked the questions, did you get a yes? And was it freely chosen? So we'll look at a few scenarios on the slide deck and talk about that. But I think the other thing is, are they able to say yes, right? Are they 15? So if they're 15 and they said yes and it was freely chosen, it's not consent and you could get in trouble. All right, so, this is kind of the same thing. So 2 yeses. Did they say yes? If yes, was it freely chosen? Consent. And to add that other piece, and they're able to say yes. And then if yes, but no, wasn't freely chosen, then it's not consent. Oh, I didn't include some scenarios, but I will get you some of those too. All right. So this is a piece on sexual abuse. So if we're talking about a relationship where someone's asking you for permission and you're saying yes or no, and it's freely chosen, there's also some areas outside of relationships where somebody might be sexually abused as well. When someone touches a person's sexual parts without permission, asks you to touch their sexual parts, make you look at his or her sexual parts, or makes you do sexual acts. So another example might be a staff person asks to take a bath with you, a brother wants to lie down naked and watch pornography with you, especially when they tell you to keep it a secret. A secret is when the person doesn't want you to ever tell anyone else. A surprise is something you're keeping private, but the surprise will come out soon. And I think that someone telling you not to tell anyone is and I mentioned that before, is a really good sign, because lots of times people with disabilities are getting taken advantage of online, right? So they say, I'm your boyfriend, so send me money. And they might say, but let's keep this a secret. But you could say, I usually say, don't send money or accept money online. It's just a hard, fast rule. Because there are stories like that. And I also say that people online are casual friends. So we wouldn't talk about private things with them. And that really what happens is people meet online, but then they meet face to face in person. And so there's just a lot of tricks around making sure you're in a public place when you meet someone for the first time, making sure they're who they say they are, things like that. So there's a lot of online skills too. And anyway, also the sexual assault is usually someone that you know, not a stranger. I think for people with disabilities, is 86 to 90% are someone that they know. So what are sexual private parts? The parts that are covered by underwear or a bathing suit. Females usually vulva and clitoris and breast, and male is usually penis and scrotum. The only time it's okay for someone to touch your private sexual parts is when they're helping you bathe and you need it. When a doctor or nurse is doing an exam to make sure you're healthy, or when you're being sexual with someone and you have both said yes, and you're of age. So this is just an example. What can happen too is when we control or restrict relationships, what self-advocates say is they just don't go to that person anymore and they work around them. And we really want to be in on these conversations so that if something bad happens, they have someone to talk to. Or why not? As soon as we control, we lose the opportunity to be part of that conversation. And as parents, to share our values, and as professionals, to give education. So we don't want to restrict. And, one of the things that's often said is you want to tell someone, even if you're somewhere you weren't supposed to be, you won't get in trouble for being there. So you're working for Mr. Sims, who's your neighbor, you're raking leaves outside. He asks you to come in for some juice. You go inside, even though your family told you not to go inside, just rake the leaves and come home. You go inside because you're really thirsty. And he asks you to show him your sexual parts and let him touch them. What do you do? And so that really teaching, like you say, no, I'm not going to do that, and I'm going to leave, right? So you want to just leave. But what if they say, I'll give you a new tape or music if you let me? So they're bribing. What if he said, I'll hurt your parents if you don't let me? We still want to be able to tell. And it's okay, you don't have to, but don't tell anyone I asked. It's our little secret. And it's important to tell because Mr. Sims needs help. You didn't do anything wrong, even if you were somewhere you weren't supposed to be. It's important to tell. If people don't believe you, keep telling them or tell someone else until someone will listen. And that's something with people with disabilities, they're often not believed. And if there is a court case surrounding the incident, they're often not believed, they're discredited. And I think that really comes from this idea that they're children, even if they're 25. So we want to treat people the age they are. And I think believe people. Yeah. We tend to not believe, but we want to believe no matter what and go with them or towards them. And then here's just a few things on speaking up. So teaching our kids to speak up, to say what you want without feeling guilty. I think that's a really good one, and it might be good for all of us, not just kids. I'm working on saying no as far as, the work I take on. It's hard for us to, for many of us, not all, to speak up, but we want to sit or stand straight and face the person, look them in the eyes if you can, keep a good distance. So you don't want to be right in their face, and use a good voice tone rather than screaming. We want to just be talking, a regular voice tone. Stick up for what you believe in. Be positive even when you disagree. and know your rights and how to get them. Use good facial expressions, start the conversation, ask questions, speak up. Don't wait for permission to say something. So sometimes we go, oh, I don't know if I should say anything. Don't wait, just say it. So my child loves when people tickle him, and he gets people's hands to tickle him, but I don't know how to say, please don't do that. And how can I teach him not to ask for tickles? How old is he? Okay, 7. Okay, so I guess my first question would be, why do you think he's asking? What's the meaning behind this behavior, asking for tickles? Do they just love them because they're just so fun? Or, why do you think this is? Are they wanting to have some touch in their lives? Like, what is the reason it's happening? And I think that might be one of those things that you say, there's certain people who can tickle you. So we wouldn't ask a stranger, we wouldn't ask someone we don't know very well, we wouldn't ask a doctor, maybe close family and friends. But that would be the only person you would ask. And if they said no, we have to move on. We've got to respect that too. So depending on if that would work or not, how can I teach him not to ask for tickles? Yeah, but I guess I'd say, like, why do you like tickles? What is it? It might be connection or touch. And let's find some ways that that you can get those needs met without potentially bothering people or asking people for tickles all the time. Or so I think that's one of the things we often do, is say no, no, no to a behavior, but we want to figure out why they're doing it and try to meet that need in a more socially acceptable way. So we can teach sort of boundaries and but having a conversation about, why do you like it when you ask people for tickles? And are people enjoying it themselves, or are they getting uncomfortable too, would be the other thing. And I know this is also an issue around tickling, where sometimes people just tickle little kids and without asking, and the kid is starting to feel uncomfortable with the tickling, but they're not being listened to as well. So I think maybe showing the consent video and just talking about tickles are only with certain people, and finding out what does he like about it, and try to meet that need in a more socially acceptable way. All right, so I'm at the questions part, but I feel like we got a lot of great questions, and I'm curious what questions you all have. I know you've asked along the way, but any other questions that you are curious about around talking to your kids? And I also realized that I was starting to talk about little kids and the topics to start with and body parts, but we also want to talk about how babies are made. There's nothing wrong. It will not harm a child to know how babies are made. And that's for the younger kid. You want to make sure they have kind of a sense of that, because I work with people with autism that are 50 and do not know how babies are made. It will not harm them to know about this at a younger age. So those are just a few other things around little kids. And then we want to talk about body changes before our child's body changes, because when they're going through puberty, they may not know what's happening, and they find blood in their underwear and they think they're dying, or they ejaculate at night, a wet dream, and they think they're really sick. So we want to make sure that people know what's going to happen with their body, so that they're not surprised and scared. And just like, some parents might get these books when they're pregnant called What to Expect, when you're pregnant, it really helps people know what to expect. And so they're not scared when something happens as well. So talking about puberty, and lots of topics around growing up. And I'm going to show you some resources too. So any more questions? And then I'm going to pull up some
While
resources.
we're in the question and answer session, please note that I put the surveys for ACDD in English, Spanish, and Korean in the chat.
Great. All right, so this is, I'm going to share my screen so you can see it. You might be familiar with this resource, and it's Amaze, it's called. And it is top signs boys are in puberty. So you can find out, this would be good for you to just learn different things as well. But they're cartoons, but they don't feel very babyish to me. So they're great. And you can go to the top as an educator or a professional, or you could go as a parent too. So let's click on parents. And we might say, it's got different guides you can use, and be an askable parent, and all those kinds of things. And then there's also not only Amaze, which is more middle school, Amaze Juniors, even younger kids too. So you could look and see, well, what are the topics that younger kids have, like really young, right? And it helps you figure out how to talk about it too. So you can watch these things with each other. So how do you talk to young kids about sexuality? When should I start? Is playing doctor okay? So lots of really good information for younger kids, for you, but you also might use some of the videos to show them some of this as well. But I'm just, where do babies come from? How can I teach my values, which is an important piece for all of us as parents. What should I know about gender? We're looking at the toy aisle. What should kids be learning in school? So lots of great information for parents, but then we'll go back to the amaze.org, and you can just do like, okay, consent. And we come here and we get a consent video. So it's explained what it is. So you can click on that. And then I believe there's a whole Spanish section. Let me see what that, if that comes up or not. But I do know that they have Spanish videos as well. Spanish videos, I'll try that. It's not coming up, but I know they have it. Yeah, so it might take a minute to just sort of figure out where it is, but search results for Spanish. Okay. I'm probably just not searching the right words. Let's see if that helps. I don't know, maybe Maria, you can do a little research to find them, but I know they're there. Yeah. Just going to take a quick peek, but all kinds of topics for you to learn too, so that you can talk to your child as well about these topics. Because sometimes we need to learn some of it too, because things change over time and all of that. So it's a great resource. Okay, so Maria's going to do a little research to see where the Spanish ones are.
The link is in the chat box, and I am
What's that?
very impressed. The link is on the chat box. Very impressed that they have different languages.
They have different languages? And where did you find them, Maria?
If you click on the icon of the world on the top,
Okay. Yes. There you go. There you go. I'm just looking to see if there's Korean, but I'm not sure I would know. Yeah, so lots of languages. So this is a great resource to either show your kids or for yourself, just to learn. It's our own sexuality education as well. Great. Perfect. Go to the globe. Thank you, Maria. All right. Any other questions? Yay. All right. There's Korean too. That's wonderful. All right. So great resource for you. And there's also a couple things, and I don't believe these are in Spanish or Korean, but maybe for the person you're supporting or your child, if they read English or speak English, but there's NCIL, and that's the National Council for Independent Living. And it's people with intellectual developmental disabilities that are teaching to other people with disabilities. So I'm going to show you this first one, just so you can just see kind of what it's like. But you could watch these with your own children, and they're 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and it might help. Sometimes if we're a little uncomfortable watching something and then talking about it is easier. I'm sort of curious about YouTube and whether you can request translation. Do you know, Maria?
I am not sure, but I mean, sometimes the YouTube channels might have an access for you to do the automatic interpretation.
Okay. And these are on YouTube. So let me just pull this first one up.
Sex ed for
Hold on
people.
a second. Okay. Can you tell, is there somewhere? Do you see anything? You're muted, Maria.
So I'm sorry. So if you see the icon next to the closed caption,
Yeah.
click
this
that
one?
one. And go under subtitles,
Yeah.
and then see if it give you the option. Okay, go auto translate on the bottom.
Oh,
Oh no,
I'm with you.
that one. And then you
Gotcha.
can select the language. At least that way it will translate and put it within the closed caption on the language that you select. Like if you
Great.
select Spanish, then whatever the person is talking, it will be translated into Spanish.
Great. And just the closed caption part.
Yes, that
Yeah.
will be, that's correct.
Yep. So, yep. So that's good to know. All right, great. So that's one. Oh, actually, I'm going to show you this one so you can see what we have here. So we've got English for now. Oh, actually, why don't I try one? Auto translate, go for Spanish, and see how that works. Okay, there you go.
With IDD. Welcome.
Why do we have to make a video about sex ed for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities?
When the other kids had sex education, I had to go somewhere else.
Other kids got to learn about birth control and condoms and how to be parents, and all anyone ever told me was don't have sex.
My parents had a big discussion about sex with my sister, who doesn't have a disability. But when I was growing up, nobody said anything to me.
There are a lot of myths of sexuality and people with disabilities.
Some people feel people with disabilities aren't sexual and that we don't need sex education at all.
But that's not true.
People also say people with disabilities are too sexual or hypersexual. If they start talking to us about sex, we're just gonna go right out and start having sex all over the place.
That's not true either.
Other folks think people with IDD don't have the same variety of sexual and gender identity.
We do, and we shouldn't ignore that.
These myths is how people with disabilities are portrayed in the media.
So welcome to our sex ed video for and by people with IDD.
It has different parts. You can skip around. You can watch from beginning to end. It's up to you.
Produced by the National Council on Independent Living and Rooted in Rights, with support from the WITH Foundation.
Okay, great. So that is another resource, and I can send these links to Maria, and she can get them to you all. And then the last one that I'm thinking of is sex ed for self-advocates. I don't know the language, whether they're interpreted or not, but what I do know is it's from the Office of Autism Research. And if you scroll down, And there's lots of different topics that you can click on and say, okay, let's talk about this one. So dating 101, all right. And it helps you figure out how to talk about it too. And if your child reads English, you can have them read a piece and then you talk about it or something like that. So this has lots of really good information around this. It's a lot though, but might be really helpful. And the other thing that is very helpful is, oops, I just got rid of everything, there's a podcast as well. So if you don't have a strong reader, but they listen really well, you can listen to it as a podcast to hear all the different episodes as well. So that's another one. As far as language, I don't know. And maybe Maria's already researching. I don't see a globe, which would be.
They do have some resources that have been translated into Spanish. I'm going to put the link right now.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay. Okay, great. All right. I'm just going to click on that so we can all just take a look at it. So there you go. Great. And it looks like workbooks by age. All right, great. Okay. So that's all the resources that I was going to share with you. Does anyone have any more questions? Oh, actually, I'm going to share one more, but any more questions while I'm pulling up this next one?
There was a question, and I apologize if I don't remember if you answer it, but it says, I think I have to change my own behavior now. I really need to listen when my child tells me what it is and it is not okay with, and what is not okay with him, and take his request to heart. I think, and think less of the people who might feel left out, or even though they are family.
Yeah, that's great. And, I know when I teach this, I start realizing as a parent, if my kid says, oh, I can't come this weekend, mine are grown, like, oh, come on, right? So I do kind of the same thing. So really good for us to practice. Okay, sounds good. Let me know when what another weekend might work for you if you want to come home or whatever. But, we do as parents, we kind of, we want certain things too. So I think it's good for all of us to remember what you just said and let them say, no, I can't, and just accept the no. I think I know my sister feels like my dad always makes her feel guilty. And that's not good either. So how do we accept no's as parents too? Okay, great. Thank you so much. It was super good. I'm glad. I hope it was helpful. Let me show you one last thing and we can wrap things up. This is the Elevators training website, which is my small business. And we have a resource page. I'm not in Alabama, I'm in New Hampshire. And it might snow. So this is my website for my business, and I do lots of training, and we also have parent trainers who lead parent workshops as well, and one of them speaks Spanish, and I think she's worked, oh, maybe she hasn't, but so we do lots of webinars for parents as well, and professionals. But there's some helpful articles, so you can click on these, and I'm trying to think if any of these are translated. I don't think so. But there's all these different articles and other kind of free downloads, but it gives you some resources and some really helpful websites. And Advocates for Youth is the one that has the Amaze website. Okay, great, good. Well, I'm so glad that you were all here, and feel free to reach out to Elevatus if you have any questions or anything, but I know you've got lots of support here in Alabama too. So, and I can get, you know, if you need any resources or anything, please reach out. And I'm going to do some follow-up information, but actually I just remembered I want to show you one little video. I'm curious what you think of it. This just came out this year, and it's really around sexual rights or relationship rights. And a lot of self-advocates say they want, you know, the message I always give them is it's your life, your body, your mind, you get to decide what's right for you. And so many times feel really supported, but sometimes they feel like they're over supported in their relationships. Like everyone's in their business around relationships. So I like this video just because it's sort of funny, but it also makes a really good point. So we want to be supportive, but we also want to give people privacy.
Just the two of us. We can make it if we try. Just the two of us. You and I see the crystal raindrops fall and the beauty of it all. And when the sun comes shining through, just the two of us. We can make it if we try. Just the two of us, you and I. I wanna be the one. I wanna be the one with you.
All right, so what did you think of that video? Sometimes I see a couple little smiles, you know, that we thumbs up, heart, yeah. You know, we don't give people a lot of privacy, and when we give privacy, we're teaching privacy too. And so that's another thing to think about. And the other thing that I like to say to parents in particular is, if we don't teach healthy sexuality, someone else might teach unhealthy sexuality. So if we want our kids to be sexually healthy, we have to speak up and give them those messages that what they say is okay, and, you know, learn about their bodies and understand the different kinds of relationships. And I also, another tip I like to give parents is respond, don't react. So if something happens, to not react to it, but just respond to it. Not assume it means anything or whatever, just respond with maybe healthy boundaries. So your child puts their hand down their pants in a restaurant, you can say, you're touching your private parts, your sexual parts in a public place, you have to stop. You know, so we're teaching boundaries. Or, oh, you asked Mr. So-and-so to tickle you. Remember that there's only certain people we can ask to tickle us. So Mr. Smith is not, I don't know if that's the one I use, but is not one of those people. What could you ask Mr. Smith to do? Oh, we could play cards, or we could high-five each other, or, you know. So we want to be in on these conversations. We want to be askable so that our kids come to us and we can share our values, and hopefully they lead really healthy lives because of it. All right, so any last questions? Because I will wrap up. Yes, so I will send all the links of videos I showed you. And we will, I know, see that cute little puppy? He's no longer a cute little puppy. But I'll send the follow-up, and thank you all for being here.
Thank you for providing all those wonderful resources.
You're welcome.
And I know you did a training for us, but I believe it was last year, but this one was, I mean, it was different, let's put it that way, which is good. It wasn't just the same one over again. So we appreciate that.
Yeah, I think you're right that we do sort of our general skills, how to answer questions, that kind of thing, but people want to get deeper. Like, well, what do I say? I got how I say it, but what do I say? Because many of us don't really know the answers to things. So great. All right. Well, thank you for that input and for the time.
I do not see any more questions, but comments, that they appreciate so much this topic. I think that it has been great because for us, for parents, sometimes we have a difficult time understanding how do I teach personal boundaries, that it's important to teach it to our kids, right? And this provides us that education. And some of the things that resonate on my mind is that we need to start calling body parts by their proper names, right? We need to learn how to talk about safe touch and the importance of talk about consent, which nobody tell us how to address that, that important part of just human development and sexuality. So I think this was an amazing topic. Thank you so very much for your time. People are saying, muchas gracias. Thank you. This was a great topic of great importance. Thank you for everything. Thank you for the information. And Dr. Hill, is there anything else? Probably we just remind the families to fill out the survey. I will send the email with the handouts and all the resources that Ms. Katherine is going to share with us. And please make sure to fill out the links for the survey for ACDD. Let them know, if we're doing a good job, what other things do we need to do in the state of Alabama to help parents that have people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And we'll be seeing you next month with another educational program. And Dr. Hill, is there anything else?
We did get a little bit more funding from ACDD, so we will be able to do one training a month, not two. And to supplement that, again, I know I said it at the beginning, and I'm in the chat, I put the link to tigergiving.org, and that is to get interpreters for our trainings and for when we meet with families from who speak other languages one-on-one. So yeah, just want to let you know it's there. If nothing else, you can scroll down, find the picture with Maria and Miss Du and Miss Kim. And if you click on it, there's a little video that you can see what we're trying to do. So that's it. No pressure, especially after this. So you all have a great month, and we'll see you next month.
Dr. Hill, would you like to share the news about our Korean liaison?
Oh, yeah. Also, what we did, Miss Kim is in the picture that's on tigergiving.org. We were able to hire part-time, a little bit of hours a week, Miss McLaughlin Kim as a Korean community liaison. So she's going to be able to work with Korean families as well. So, but there are people that come for help from us that speak Chinese, that speak, I don't know what some other languages, Arabic, so what we want to be able to do is help them as well. So that's why we went ahead and asked for, we submitted a proposal, and we got picked to be one of the Tiger Giving places. So yeah, and it's over tomorrow. So we're excited about all of that.
So, well, once again, thank you so very much to our interpreters and to our presenter for this wonderful presentation. And we hope to see you next month, and enjoy the rest of the month of the love. Okay. And this was just a great topic. Thank you so very much. And we'll see you next month. Thank you, Ms. Katherine.
Everybody. You're welcome. Thank you.